From former president to president-elect, a major win for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris after breaking through in key battleground states and securing the presidency. Here to help us digest everything is Associate Professor Rob Goodman, an expert in politics and public administration at Toronto Metropolitan University. The first question I asked you is, what time did you get to bed?
Well, I was shooting for something reasonable like 10 or 11. I think I stretched it to around midnight. And at that point, I think the results were trending pretty clearly in Trump's direction. So it wasn't a peaceful night's sleep, but it was at least a night's sleep kind of knowing what we'd be facing in the morning. And I think that's the best you could expect.
Okay, Rob, stop me if you've heard this, but we've never seen an election like this. Never have we seen a candidate like Donald Trump here. J.D. Vance, his VP-elect, as he spoke to the crowd following the wins yesterday, he said, "This is the greatest political comeback in history. Never in history have we seen something like this." What do you make of this win?
Well, I think the idea that this could be framed in terms of Trump's personal journey or Trump's personal political comeback, frankly, I don't care. I don't think the Americans who are going to be affected by these policies care. I do think that Trump ran an overtly authoritarian campaign. I think he was very explicit about how he's going to govern. I think he's very explicit about cracking down on immigrants, on workers' rights, on trade policy. I think that's all clear across the board. But I think part of the reason that informs his comeback isn't anything to do with Trump's personal journey or his qualities or how he's clawed his way back from the status of convicted felon. It's about, I think, an American public that is still deeply, deeply angry over the impacts of COVID and especially the inflation that happened after COVID. And despite the fact that in real terms, inflation looks like it's a lot more under control, incumbent parties all over the world are getting hammered for this. And I don't think that can be chalked up to anything specific to Trump. I think it has to be chalked up to the broader economic situation and the Democrats' inability to cope with it in time.
Let's focus a little bit on the battleground states here. North Carolina, followed by Georgia, both of them going to Trump here. He was leading also in the 5 other states. What went right for the former president and what went wrong for the Harris campaign?
Well, I think the thing that went right would have to be something that applies pretty widely across the board, given these shifts across demographics, across geographies. And I think that's why we're looking at the big economic picture and economic discontent and things like inflation. But I think at the same time, when I think about what went wrong for the Harris campaign, I'm not looking at little tactical decisions at a VP pick, at a visit to a state or a podcast, at a line in a speech. I think you're kind of looking at big picture tactical decisions. And the Harris campaign made a decision that there wasn't going to be a significant break with the Biden presidency. That Harris said that she wouldn't really change a single thing except maybe inviting more Republicans into government. It was a campaign that deliberately presented Harris as a sort of middle-of-the-road, centrist establishment, campaigning with Liz Cheney sort of politician. And that was the strategy that the Harris campaign, I think, chose for the last couple of months of the campaign. I'm not sure, given the economic headwinds, what kind of difference it would have made. But I think the fact is that when that's the strategy you bank on as a political organization, and this is the result, you have to be held accountable for that strategy. It clearly didn't work to draw up those, say, moderate white suburban voters that the campaign was expecting would make the difference like it made in 2020 and 2022. That didn't happen. And at the very least, the campaign has to be accountable for why it did not happen.
What focus or pressure do you put on the fact that she only had a little over 100 days of campaigning? She had to move quick. Was that a big challenge? The criticism was Americans don't know who Vice President Kamala Harris is. She needs to reintroduce herself. Do you think she did that effectively?
Yeah, I think on a technical level, like watching the campaign, people who know more about campaigns than I do say it was a pretty technically well-run campaign. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is more the inability to break from Biden and to cast herself, or whoever the Democratic nominee might have been, as someone from fundamentally outside the system in some sort of way when there was so much anti-system energy in this election. Maybe if Biden had resigned in time, maybe if Biden had or stepped down or not run for office or recognized that he was not going to be a viable candidate after the midterms, perhaps, there might have been time for an open primary. There might have been time for, even if Harris had been the nominee, to reconsider that strategy. But I think given the constraints of a president who is deeply unpopular and still not willing to go until the last minute, I think she did what she could with a fairly bad hand.
Rob, really quickly, 30 seconds. What does this Trump win mean for Canada?
I think it's going to test our solidarity as Canadians in really powerful and strong ways, because it's going to put pressure on us as Canadians in terms of trade, in terms of security, in terms of democracy. These are times when new national identities come to the fore, and I hope the Canadian identity that comes to the fore as a result of this is one that is firmly democratic, anti-authoritarian. I want leaders across the Canadian political spectrum seeing if Trump, or when Trump, cracks down on immigrants, on worker rights, on the press, to say, we don't do that stuff here, and more importantly, to back that up with policy. And if that doesn't happen in Canada, if that doesn't happen across the board, that's going to be really clarifying too. But that's what I'm going to be paying attention to from our political leaders of all parties.
We'll be watching. Okay, Associate Professor Rob Goodman, we thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks so much.